Welcome to Change Out Loud, the podcast where change management intersects with everyday life. I'm Kara Sundar.
And I'm Adnan Ali, and today we're joined with Brian Hampton. And Brian is the founder of ChangeNerd, an online learning community designed to bring access to organizational best practices. Before starting ChangeNerd, Brian consulted at Deloitte and led change management teams at a number of private and nonprofit organizations. Welcome, Brian.
Hey, thanks for having me. I love what you guys are doing.
Great, thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
And before we get started on our topic today, I thought it would be fun just to chat a little bit about how we all cross paths. So you're the leader of an online community called ChangeNerd. We used to
Yeah.
have a podcast called Change Nerds. So how did you come to find Kara and I?
I think it was on LinkedIn. Actually, someone in the community shot me an email and was like, "Hey, I don't know if you trademarked Change Nerd, but think about it." And I was like, "What? What are you talking about?" So I called this person because I have a relationship with them, and they were like, "Look at this LinkedIn post," and that's when I became aware of it. And for me, honestly, it wasn't about being protective over it. It was just being aware of it because there's a number of different change management online,
Mhm.
what I consider online communities. You have change management review, and then you have PMIs doing a ton of stuff. So there's a number of online forums. So it's cool just to be aware of them. But obviously, yeah, somebody that I know took it like really personal. Was like, hey, you need to trademark this. But yeah, it was through LinkedIn, and I'm glad that we connected and
Mhm.
we're able
Right.
to come together. So this is cool.
And then we just reached out to you, I think, and said, "Hey, we've kind of got similar names. Let's just
Yeah.
chat," and found out we were actually, in a way, attacking the same issue with two different perspectives, wanting to continue the change management conversation,
Mhm.
provide a space to talk about a diverse set of issues. So it's actually been really fun to get to know you and be a part of your community,
Yeah, thank
and
you.
to have you on today. But in case you were wondering, this is why we're not called Change Nerds anymore. We wanted to respect the work that Brian's doing and
I appreciate it.
just change the brand a little bit.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I do think that we are moving obviously in the same direction. The purpose is the same. We want to democratize best practices so that everybody can get access to it. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, we're definitely moving in the same direction.
Great. We're so happy to have you on. So for today, one of the topics we wanted to talk about, and Brian, you had brought this up with Kara and I during our first engagement when we began to chat with one another. We
Yeah.
wanted to talk more about social learning. So for our listeners who may not be familiar with what social learning is, do you mind providing just a quick overview of what social learning is?
Yeah. So, very simply, social learning is leveraging the knowledge of others. That's all it is,
Mm,
Mm,
right? It's leveraging the knowledge of others in an ongoing way. That's all social learning is, and it's actually like the oldest form of learning. You
mhm.
know,
mm,
and so they always say, right? If you want to teach a man to fish, right, you have to kind of be there and show them. It's the same thing. It's tapping into the stories and the experiences of others so that you can better yourself. Both professionally and personally.
And I think as we kind of come out of this generation that is used to more formal training
Right.
and waterfall
Mhm. Right.
projects where training might take months to complete and deliver, and then there are very static learning documentations that, people look back on. As we move into this more agile space, ongoing iteration, continuous improvement,
Mhm.
the
Yeah.
learning area also has to adapt.
Yeah.
And one area that we've seen, I think, in our everyday lives, this happening is, Instagram and videos posted on LinkedIn, where you can just scroll through, either read or watch the video and, learn something along the way. So we're
Absolutely.
constantly getting this information and this content. And yet in our change plans,
Right.
often training is this very linear thing. So
Yeah.
I thought we could talk today about, some best practices we've seen, some new ideas of how to incorporate social learning into a change plan. So Brian, can you talk to us a little bit about, what you've seen work and be successful?
Understanding what are those outcomes that you want to drive. What I've seen organizations do is really two things. Number one, leveraging a community of practice. So, and this primarily happens and based on the exposure that I have with different companies, companies that have like 5,000 or more employees, they tend to form these community of practices,
Mhm.
which is awesome because if you have something as tactical as an SAP implementation, or if you're doing a brand relaunch, you can obviously leverage these different community of practices to upskill people very
Mm,
quickly. The other element I've seen is companies reaching out to other companies to get
Mhm.
expertise.
mm,
So if you're, and so as you think about the change plan, if you're a change management practitioner, you're developing a change plan, you're not limited to the traditional communication processes that we have today.
Mhm.
Think about other companies that may be in your industry, or even companies outside of your industry that may be
hmm
having similar issues. And go on LinkedIn, reach out to them, and see if someone will be willing to speak to your project team or maybe some impacted stakeholders, right? Because it does two things. Number one, it shows that you're going above and beyond. And number two, it's really, really engaging the impacted stakeholders in a whole different way.
hmm
So those are some ways that I've seen. I've used them myself, and what I can tell you, I've received testimonials from different people in the ChangeNerd community. They're actually using a lot of my videos and other
Mm.
videos in
mm.
their project kickoffs and things of that nature, which I think that's just the best way to go. Thinking outside the box.
Yeah, and with video too, it's you can replay it, you can use it in different forums if there's a particular issue, making that content you can spread around more broadly.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of a particular project plan I worked on where we have Yammer at my company, and
Hmm.
so we made kind of a mini community of practice with our
Yeah.
super users, which was really a safe space to be able to ask questions. This
Hmm.
particular technology that we were beginning to use has seasons where not a lot of people use it, but then at quarter end, everybody needs to use it. And there was a lot of fear that when that time came, they would feel really alone and like they had to go back to all their training materials from
Yeah.
earlier. So this was a way just to open up questions and let other people answer it as well, which took the pressure off of the project team so
Yeah.
that they could focus on, technical bugs and things like that and allow people to help one another. And I found that to be extremely successful.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
I think that's a really good call out. Building in the continuous communication into how
Yeah.
you're deploying your learning. So we did something similar on a project implementation that we had for a reporting system. And
Mm.
originally, just going into it, we thought we don't want 1,000 people coming to us for the answers. The
Hmm.
reality is, as we train up
Yeah.
more people in the organization will have the answer. So why not leverage that capability in the organization? So I think the world we live in today, where there's continuous communication, programs like Slack and Teams and Yammer, any way where you can keep those in the forefront,
Hmm.
it goes a long way, I think, just to um, leverage the capability in your organization and the knowledge that's there, but also just so it doesn't all fall again back on the project team. To your point, it can be so
Absolutely.
overwhelming
Yeah.
sometimes.
Absolutely. I think this idea around community of practice is just so
Hmm.
important. If you think about like ChangeNerd and it's really just a digital community of practice. That's all it really is.
Hmm.
We have different forums. You have certification programs. Different universities have different programs as well, and things that like those are great starters. ACMP is our professional association, right? Great starter. But social learning allows individuals to own their own learning process, right?
Mm.
And so adding on, building on what you just said, like building the infrastructure to allow people to own their own learning journeys, like I think that's the only way we're going to win as practitioners.
Right.
Yeah.
So, what should we watch out for, Brian? Have you ever seen social learning go south? Is there any kind of safety net we should put in place as we're building a social learning platform?
Yeah. So, and yeah. So, it depends. It depends. So, if you're if you're if you want to implement this concept within your organization, I would say be very goal oriented. Get
Mm,
very, very clear on the business outcomes that you want to enable, and then design kind of your guest speakers or whatever that content is, right? Um, Organize that content in a way that it enables this business outcome. Um, if you want to create your own community just outside of a company, um, have a vision, right?
Mm.
And don't be all over the place.
Mhm.
I made certain mistakes when I launched ChangeNerd. I actually launched it December 2018. And so at first, like, you just feel like this has to be in the world, right? You want to create.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I was on LinkedIn, like inviting all of these people, DNI experts, HR experts, like all over the place, and which was cool, and and people connected with my passion, and they wanted to have the conversation. But then, as I was getting feedback from members in the community, they wanted a more consistent theme.
Mm.
And so I chose to focus on organizational best practices, and I chose to. We can still talk about a variety of topics,
Mm-hmm.
but it needs to connect to like real world examples.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And to be honest with you, um, there's a number of companies that I know that run a community of practice, and it just gets stronger over time because
Mm.
you're going to have to tweak it, and you'll get better if you're the organizer. You're going
Mm-hmm.
to get better over time.
Mm-hmm. I
Yeah.
think that's a great takeaway for our listeners that you don't have to do it right the first time. You can
You
adjust
don't.
as you go, just like agile projects. It can be an
Exactly.
agile community of practice.
Yep, yep. Something else I want to mention, um, like stay away from scripted conversation.
Mm.
I love this. I love
Right.
this, right? Like I'm in Chicago. It's 8:45 in the morning, whatever. Like we're just up. We're not beautiful all the way, right? Right, and we're just having conversation. And I used to get really, really nervous. I remember a friend reaching out to me because at one point I had a podcast and I was like so scripted. I'm talking and I got my script right here. And she reached out to me. She's like, Brian, can you just be yourself? Right. And like I was embarrassed. I was like, wow, I didn't know that was an option. Right. Like, but just like, we're
Bring
all
that
experts.
authenticity.
Yes, like we're all experts in our own right. And just get on the microphone, leverage technology, and like have a conversation. It doesn't have to be scripted. And so I know that there are some company cultures that, people want to see it, they want to see the agenda and talking points. I want the questions in advance. And I would advise people, don't get in trouble, but like I would advise to like you want to stay away from scripted and like have a theme,
Mhm.
right? Talk about the overall outline, but it doesn't have to be so buttoned up because that's when you lose the flavor. And what I've learned over the last 12 months is people really appreciate that authenticity.
Oh, sorry.
No, no, it's cool.
See, this is authentic me.
Yeah.
So, no, I completely agree with that. I think oftentimes we get lost in, how am I coming across? Does this sound professional enough? Whatever that means. And I think
Exactly.
it's just fun to be yourself, right? Be yourself. People appreciate that, and you'll probably deliver the message a lot more effectively if you're speaking the way you normally
Mhm.
speak and you're just being yourself. So, as change managers, are there any takeaways that we have from social learning? So, what can we do tangibly in our change management planning? Any tips there?
Yeah. Again, one thing that I would advise, I think that's going to give anyone quick wins is like start building connections with other companies within your industry, right? Um, Oftentimes at the CEO level, at the executive level, they know their peers within other companies, right? And they've have a relationship over a very long time. It's at the mid-manager level
Mm,
where we struggle um to for whatever reason we're not really aware of our counterparts at other in other companies, or we don't have those relationships,
right.
and but we have LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn is a great connection platform. So bottom line is, think about the information, the content that your project team or impacted stakeholders may need, and reach out to other companies that you believe are going through similar experiences and try to leverage each other, right? You could be a guest speaker for another project team, and vice versa. I think that's a very tangible takeaway, and it doesn't cost any money. Right?
Right.
Imagine bringing this idea up at a steering committee or an operating committee, right? And you can say, guess what? no additional budget is needed, right? It's an email. I'm sending an email to this person at this company and whatever. And guess what? You don't have to fly them in,
Mhm.
do a Zoom call, do a Skype call, right? Like that's the beauty of being in this connected economy in my mind. And I think that's a way that we as change management practitioners, we can add extreme value to our companies and our project teams.
Yes, and I think for some of our listeners who are maybe a bit skeptical or just unsure about reaching out proactively to other people at other companies randomly, um, I would just say you'd be surprised. You would
You
really be
will.
surprised with, who you'll find out there that is oftentimes, facing a lot of the same problems that you're facing now, maybe that they've overcome or are going through. And it's just so great to have that, collective group of people that you can just bounce ideas off of. I mean, just look at the three of us, right? I mean,
Yes,
how we met, it was just very random and very sudden. And we have, in many ways, the shared vision. So if
yes.
you're a listener out there and you're just thinking, oh, I don't know if I could do that, you would honestly be surprised. So I completely agree. It's a very easy first step just to open some of those doors.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Brian. This has really been a pleasure, and we hope our listeners enjoyed it as well.